Hi, Mark. Really glad that you've joined me on the inaugural show of What's in the AI podcast. Yeah.
This is very exciting. Thank you so much, Claire.
Yeah, very welcome. Thank you for joining me. I was absolutely fascinated with your theory on the 4 fears. Having suffered from a certain amount of, insecurity and business trepidation over the years, you do come across these hurdles and you think, oh, is it just me? So I was quite relieved when you'd actually put a name to it and said, look, we can work through this. So could you give us a little bit more info about that?
Certainly can, yeah. And I'm glad you kind of picked up on the fact that everyone has these and that's okay. But that's essentially the whole point of what I do, really, is that kind of reassurance that, hesitations, wobbles, self-doubt, limiting beliefs, we all have them. In some ways, they're actually a good thing because they're kind of just sort of helping us test our own boundaries and what it is we really want to do and why that's important to us and why those kind of butterflies do creep in. But also there is a way to embrace them. They never go away. I've still got them. I'll always have them. But by embracing them, they can help move you closer to the kind of success you want rather than be the sort of obstacles or hurdles that they can be.
So how did you, was it your own direct experience? I picked up a copy of your book, which I'm absolutely loving, by the way.
Thank you.
Highly recommend it. I know there's a little story at the beginning, but do you want to go through that, how you came to that realization? I know you were working, you had a big job and you'd come across, some issues with the sales team, surprising issues.
Yeah, sure. Just to kind of give a very quick sort of précis of my background. So I'm a graphic designer by trade. So I went to university and did the whole graphic design, visual communication thing, adore storytelling. That's kind of my passion, really. And I love being a designer and taking other people's kind of briefs and stories and turning them into something that their audiences would really resonate to and love. So the big job that you referred to, I was working for a publishing company as a marketing designer, creating all the leaflets and brochures and all that kind of stuff to support quite a sort of diverse sales team. Because of this kind of passion that I have for stories and this importance, I think, that there should be between understanding, connecting to the audience, I wanted to spend more and more time with the people I was serving. And in the conversations I was having with the sales force, thinking, these guys and girls are phenomenal at what they do. They're just going out there. It was children's books is what they actually worked with. So they were sharing these children's books into their communities and making a difference to local education. It was a really sort of lovely kind of organization to be a part of. And I wanted to find out what it was that drove them to go out and do all these things. What kind of caught me by surprise, I suppose, was those hesitations. It was that kind of lack of confidence and lack of self-belief. Although all of the kind of, the figures and the sales charts and the stats said that, these were incredible people, fantastic at what they did. They were hitting their targets. They were winning incentives. They themselves couldn't see it. Through those kind of conversations ongoing, sort of came to this realization that the hesitations they kept referring to, or the ones that kept coming up sort of the most often, were these, what I call the 4 fears. The kind of, I'm not ready, I'm not good enough, I don't have time, what if I fail? And as I kind of moved my way up through the company and took on more responsibility and became more senior, rather than just throw leaflets and brochures and incentives and that sort of thing at the sales force to try and motivate them, kind of had this idea of what if we could embrace these fears? What if we could help them with kind of mindset and limiting beliefs and self-confidence? What difference would that make in terms of unlocking their confidence and therefore their success? Spoiler alert, the short answer is it was a game changer. Suddenly we had all these, this sales force, we were growing from a reasonable sized company to a massive division of this multi-channel organization year on year consistently, simply because we'd allowed these people, but we'd started investigating, helping them think about what it is they really wanted and why that was so important to them that they could embrace those hesitations and turn them around and actually keep going.
That's a really interesting point about getting to the bottom of it, because you can say you are ready, you are good enough, you do have time, failure, well, that's just a matter of opinion. And you can say those things to people, but they won't sink in until they're ready. Maybe they're ready to actually believe it, for themselves. But the why of, and I know you touch on that, you go into that, the 5 whys, there's more than one why. So why do you believe this? And limiting beliefs as well. I found that aspect of it really, really interesting, because you think you know your why, but perhaps you actually don't. And the reasons why you won't do something maybe is because you're not that driven to do it. Maybe it isn't your why. You think it is, but maybe it's not.
You're absolutely right. So yeah, you're spot on, because, again, we're all motivated to do certain things. But when you come up against a barrier, is there enough motivation? Is there enough passion? Is there enough kind of commitment to that goal that's going to keep you going, and whatever the obstacle is? So example, going back to the sort of the sales force who were selling children's books in local communities, they would want to share the books into schools, and they'd come up against the school secretary who wouldn't let them get in and have the conversation with the literacy coordinator or something. They might have said at the start, my why is to make a difference to education in my local community, which is beautiful. That's a lovely kind of vision or goal to have for your business. But if at that first kind of no or blocker from the school secretary, you're like, this is too hard, and clearly we haven't dug deep enough into there's something more. There's something more about that making a difference to local education. Why is that important to you? And as you've just touched on the kind of 5 whys, whatever the answer to that question, why is it important to you to make a difference to local education? Well, because my kids go to those schools and I want the best for them. Okay, but why is that important to you? And you keep going until suddenly, and it might be more than 5 whys, but suddenly there's like, hold on a minute, this is the thing that I really want. And this is the thing that I'm so passionate about that I'm prepared to be brave enough to keep going, even when the school secretary says, nope, not today, thank you.
I've been in sales for many, many years. I've field sales rep, door to door. I've done all kinds of sales. And one time I got a job selling Frankie machines. I mean, do they even exist anymore? I'm not sure if they do. But I sold Frankie machines, and I'd rather stick pins in my eyes and talk about Frankie machines. I had a target. I had to go out. I had bills to pay, and I could not find it in me to sell Frankie machines. It just didn't mean anything to me. There wasn't enough reason for me to do it. I mean, yeah, I'm target driven. I like sales. I like to achieve, but there's a limit to what I'll go and bang doors down for. And Frankie machines, frankly, is one of them.
I can understand that. Yeah. In my last job, we did have a Frankie machine. It was the least exciting thing in our office, I have to say. But yeah, I'm with you.
Absolutely. But so when you're talking to, I know you've worked with hundreds and hundreds of business owners. What's the common theme then for what drives them, for what gets them up? I mean, I know we have our worries, but what actually drives us in general as a demographic, if you like? Is there one?
That's a really interesting question. I don't think you can sort of narrow it down to one sort of consistent or recurring theme, because we're all different and we're all driven by different things. And in the same way that we have a different relationship or balance with each of those 4 fears, that in itself is a kind of reflection of what it is we do actually want. And what I love about what I do, again, going back to the whole storytelling thing, is my job is basically to listen and help someone else kind of write that better story for themselves. So by exploring those whys, digging deeply into that, actually, this is what I want. And it could be anything. It could be the kind of, the 6-7 figure salary annually, monthly. But again, when you start digging into that kind of conversation, it's okay, what does that money represent? And then when you start exploring what does that money represent, again, it's how does that then make you feel? And is that money, as you were just touching on, it's security, it's the mortgage being paid, it's making sure you've got a roof over your head, you're providing for your family, etc., etc., etc. But why are those things important to you? What is it about those values and beliefs? What is it, your upbringing even, that makes you think that having the nice house and the nice car and providing for your children is important? Some people don't want any of that. They want the nomadic lifestyle. They want something completely different. But it's, I suppose, the conversation again, going back to if there is a recurring theme, this can sound a little bit naive or a bit kind of woo. But I think the common theme is contentment. What is that thing that makes you truly content? And it's up to you what that is. It could be whatever you want. No one should judge, and no one should say, "Oh no, that doesn't sound right." It's your story.
Yeah, I suppose, and it's helping to, frame it in a way when you dig in a little bit deeper into, why you behave in a certain way or why you've got certain blockers. You have CEOs or big companies who have imposter syndrome, or who do feel insecure about how have I got here? Do I deserve to be here even? And there's that constant fear of being found out. I've read about those kind of situations before. And I think a lot of us, especially when in like public facing roles as well, maybe do have that syndrome of not feeling like, maybe perhaps presenting a part of yourself that isn't, does it align with your values? I mean, this sounds like, it would be quite scary when you're talking about fears, but actually the lightheartedness of the book, of the way that you presented it, and perhaps the way that you work with people, takes that fear away. that's how I found, that's how I felt as I was going through it.
Thank you. Yeah, fear is essentially a matter of opinion, I would say. Yeah. Again, a lot of the work I do is kind of helping people kind of step back and notice that fear, the version of failure that they're sort of projecting, the comparisonitis, the imposter syndrome, etc., all of those things exist in our mind as emotional reactions. And the more we retreat away from the emotion and lean into the facts, again, going back to the stories, we've all got incredible stories. Claire, you sold franking machines. You probably did it very, very well. Yeah. But regardless of that emotional kind of relationship you have with the devices and how they absolutely did not light you up,
Did not.
But there's still a story to be told around that part of your career. And there are things that you achieved on the back of selling franking machines, and there are people you have met, and there are experiences that help move you forward. And there's all these kind of really simple but factual events that have made you who you are and have set you on that path to who you want to continue to become. And it's leaning into those more than the limiting emotions of, I didn't really enjoy it, so I didn't commit to it, so I didn't make time for it, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, this is one of the things it's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, if I'm honest. You start talking about fear and people do, as you say. You're inviting people to go to a place of vulnerability.
Yeah, like,
So I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to, in any way show any kind of vulnerability or weakness. And the beauty of a book is, as you said at the start, we all have those kind of wobbles and fears. We don't necessarily want to talk about them out loud yet. But if you can learn about them, get comfortable with them, appreciate that you're not alone with them, just by picking up a book and in your own time exploring that, that's a good thing, I think.
For sure, yeah. I mean, already, it really has helped. But I think looking at the concept of failure as well is a really healthy thing to do in business as well. Because how many iterations, how many times do you need to pivot, how many times you need to change your mind. People might say, oh, you've done this, you've done this, you've done this, you've done this. But it's like, well, hold on. But each time I've been learning from what I did then, and over time that accumulates and you might have one light bulb moment. But do you find that failure or fear of failure is another huge stumbling block for many people in business? If they have an idea, they think, oh, what a great product or what a great idea, and we could go in this direction. And it is a great idea, but then they freeze. And how do you suggest somebody gets over that block? Because these are life-changing behaviors, aren't they, to kind of deal with?
Yeah. And it's worth saying that of the four fears, I always kind of describe the fear of failure as like being the big one. The one that kind of overarches the other three. Technically, that's not actually true because they all sort of interweave. The whole fear of failure is that comparisonitis. Failure, again, is subjective. What am I failing compared to? So that's looking sideways, and there's imposter syndrome. There's to work your way through the four in kind of order. The idea of not being ready is essentially you saying, I can't put out this thing yet because I haven't dotted the I's, crossed the T's, chose the right colours, polished the fonts. So what you're actually saying when you think I'm not ready is it's not good enough yet. I don't have enough time is I need more time to get it good enough, because ultimately if it's not ready, if it's not good enough and I haven't got the time to fix it, it's going to fail. And therefore you have that emotional decision of, do I do it or not? And you're right, that sort of the failure blocker is the big one, because that's essentially the one that stops us dead in our tracks in terms of going to retreat back into my comfort zone, and I'm not going to do that thing that actually could take me to that place that I deserve to be.
So in terms of working on the mindset of I am worth it, I can do this, I am capable, how long is that process of unraveling those knots or those limiting beliefs that you have about yourself? Can this be done in an afternoon, Mark?
Can this be done in an afternoon? You could certainly help somebody find that sort of nugget of confidence that helps them take the next step. In a half-hour call, you can do that. And the beauty of that is that it only takes one little first step for that person to remind themselves, oh, actually, I can do this. I am better at this than I thought. I am good enough. I found the time. And that could itself unlock that process. How long is a piece of string? It depends how ingrained those fears are. It also depends how connected you are in terms of that why, that ultimate vision. Two things that I like to talk about are clarity and bravery. How clear are you in that vision, what it is you really want and why it's important to you? And then how brave are you in terms of actually going out and getting it? Depending where you are, that kind of starting point, that sets the scene for the journey we go on together.
So the clarity of goal, clarity of vision, clarity of where where you actually want to get to. I think that's also, people can spend years not being very, very clear. And that's if you don't know where you're going, well, you can't really get there.
Indeed. Yeah, where you want to go can change as well. So, if we were starting to have this conversation now, we dug into the point where you said, wow, eureka moment, I know exactly what it is that I'm doing all of this for and where I want to go. 5 years' time, that could completely change because your life would have changed, your circumstances would have changed, and so on and so forth. So it's really important to kind of keep revisiting. And I mean, before we sort of started recording, you said there's this recurring theme in the book. You keep asking the same question. And I think it's important of all of us that we do revisit those questions. Because who you were when you were selling Franken machines, who I was when I was working with children's book sellers, we're not the people now that we were then.
Can I just say, I did graduate up to mobile phones quite quickly from the...
There you go.
I got out of those phones as soon as I could. Yeah, I think really, there's a really nice quote, and I just kind of wanted to more or less wind down with a quote about the mindset harbor, which is a really nice visualization of it. If you can meditate and go to that mindset harbor, it would be a beautiful place to go. And you say a ship in the harbor is safe, but that's not what ships are built for, which I absolutely love, because you spend all this time, don't you, creating your ship or this idea of what's going to take you there, and then you don't set sail, or you kind of set sail, but you stick to the coastline. Or when I was learning to swim, I wouldn't swim across the pool. I'd just swim, along the edge, because what if I drowned? Somebody wouldn't be able to pick me. And it's those, and they're ingrained from being really small. I put a post on LinkedIn the other day about, I was thrown off a horse when I was a little girl. Wouldn't get on it. And that's nothing to do with business, but it's a lot to do with confidence and mindset.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to put my hand and say it's not my quote originally. So I'm not claiming that one, but you are absolutely right. And I talk about the 4 fears of business ownership. It's not just about business. And as you say, in every aspect of our life, there's those things, there's that kind of, historic part of our brain that is determined to keep us safe. And it's doing an honorable thing. So that brain, your brain, is still telling you horse is bad. Don't do horses because,
it doesn't.
But of course, it's wrong.
Yeah,
it's wrong.
Is it wrong though, Mark? Is it wrong? Would it throw me off again? It's like you've got to get back on the horse to find out.
Yeah, literally, figuratively, absolutely. It's what's the best that can happen is the kind of phrase, isn't it?
I love that. Not what's the worst that can happen, but actually what's the best that can happen. Flip it on its head. Mark, if you had 3 pieces of advice or 3 action points for our audience now to take away and say, right, well, I really get this. I'm going to give it a little bit of a go, and I'm going to try and at least, attempt one change in behavior that could make some kind of changes. What would they be? What 3 things could you perhaps tell them?
I think the first one would be lean into the facts. Yeah. So whatever it is that's in front of you that's causing any kind of hesitation, see if you can move yourself away from the emotion and closer to the facts. So again, coming back to the horse story, statistically, what are the facts or the numbers in terms of people getting thrown, kicked, hurt, compared to, again, factually, the enjoyment you had when you used to ride? So that's number 1, lean into the fact. Number 2, it's okay to wobble. Again, don't beat yourself up. We will always wobble. Even, I still wobble. I hope beyond hope that the work I do with all the people that I support will help them write that better story. But of course, there are moments where I think, have I just said the right thing? Have I opened the right door for them? Et cetera, et cetera. That's fine. We're human. That's the best thing about being human. We wobble because we care. So embrace the wobbles. Number 2. Number 3, leaning into the lovely comment that you made about the book, have fun with it. Basically, whatever that ultimate why is that you're kind of, setting sail for, make sure it fills your heart with joy. So no more Franken machines.
Yeah. And on that note, I'm off to have fun. But also, I love that. So leaning into the facts, it's okay you have a little wobble every now and then, and just make sure every funnel on the ride, don't take everything quite so seriously because you think fear, this is going to be horrendous. But actually, it's not. It's not. The biggest thing to fear is fear itself. Not my quote, obviously. Not sure who it was. Yeah. But thanks so much, Mark.
Thank you.
Already, I've found so much value in your wisdom.
God bless you.
What you've been writing and sharing with everybody. So yeah, thank you for joining, and hopefully we'll see you again at some point further down my podcast journey when you've got book number 2 on the go, maybe.
Oh, you never know. You never know. I didn't even thought that far ahead, to be honest. But no, well, sincerely, thank you so much. I'm even more honoured to know that I'm your first guest. And if this is your first hosting thing, then you're going to nail it, because you were brilliant. Thank you, Claire. This has been really, really good fun.
No worries at all.